Back in the 1980s and 90s, millions of daily wage workers across rural India lived completely off the grid of the formal economy. These workers lacked the basic paperwork the government required. They didn't have PAN cards, official ID proofs, or salary slips. But the paperwork was only part of the barrier. To an uneducated laborer, a traditional bank with marble floors and strict clerks was an intimidating place where they expected to be completely shut out. This combination of missing documents and deep psychological fear meant a massive amount of cash was circulating through the country, completely unbanked. Sahara stepped into this void with a pitch that addressed both barriers. You don't come to the bank, we will come to you. They introduced doorstep banking. Local agents went house to house, collecting micro-savings every single day, sometimes accepting as little as 1 rupee. This model bypassed the traditional bank's requirements. It required almost zero KYC documentation, and it relied on local agents who were often treated as trusted members of the family. This network scaled at a rate that traditional banks couldn't match. Eventually, that single connection between an agent and a worker multiplied into 6.1 crore depositors and 1 million agents. Sahara had successfully constructed a massive parallel network of cash, one that operated entirely on personal relationships rather than the rules of the formal banking world. But managing 24,000 crore rupees in cash requires a level of infrastructure that Sahara simply did not have. Instead of secure digital ledgers, millions of transactions were being tracked in torn, dusty notebooks and loose piles of paper. These primitive methods created a system with almost no internal verification. For the Reserve Bank of India, it was a nightmare to audit because there was no reliable way to prove where the money was actually going. The very feature that made Sahara popular, the lack of paperwork, meant the entire system was inherently untrackable and unsafe for the people who used it. This lack of documentation also allowed the company to use its customers' lack of financial literacy against them. The contracts were designed with a harsh penalty. If a worker missed a single daily micro-installment, Sahara would quietly reduce the interest payouts on their entire savings. Because the victims often could not read the complex terms in their contracts, they continued making daily payments without realizing their returns had been slashed. The same agents who provided convenience were the ones enforcing a system that stripped away interest the moment a worker's daily wages fluctuated. The sheer volume of this undocumented cash eventually forced the Reserve Bank of India to step in. They focused on Sahara's financial arm, SIFCL, which was registered as a residuary non-banking company, or RNBC. Think of an RNBC like this bucket. As it takes in money from the public, the bucket fills up. To protect that money, the law requires the company to buy highly secure government bonds, which act as heavy shields over the depositors' funds. But the RBI discovered Sahara was allegedly ignoring this requirement, failing to buy the safe bonds and leaving billions of rupees in depositor money exposed. Sahara's operations were moving forward on a legally broken foundation, with 6.1 crore people left entirely unprotected by the law. In 2008, the Reserve Bank of India decided that Sahara's regulatory failures could no longer be ignored. They issued a direct order. Sahara had to immediately stop taking new deposits from the public. For a company that relied on a constant daily flow of new cash to sustain its operations, this order was a catastrophic blow. With the main source of cash cut off, the clock was ticking. Sahara desperately needed a different way to bring in massive amounts of capital to keep the empire from collapsing. Sahara's search for survival would lead them toward a new set of rules and a legal loophole that would eventually trigger a The Sahara operation moved from the streets into the high-stakes legal world of corporate boardrooms. Its primary tool was a specific financial instrument, the OFCD, or Optionally Fully Convertible Debenture. While the name is complex, the mechanism is simple. A debenture is a corporate IOU. You lend a company 1,000 rupees today, and they hand you a paper promising to pay you back 1,200 rupees with interest at a later date. The convertible part gives you a choice at the end of that term. You can take the cash repayment, or you can choose to convert that debt directly into shares of the company. Sahara utilized 2 corporate entities specifically to issue these OFCDs, SIRECL and SHICL. These engines began pumping these financial instruments out to the Indian public at an industrial scale. To avoid the oversight that usually accompanies large-scale fundraising, Sahara's legal team categorized the entire operation as a private placement. Legally, a private placement is an offer meant for a select group of individuals. However, the scale of Sahara's investor base tells a different story. The map zooms out to encompass roughly 3 crore people, a group of 30 million individuals. Sahara used the dense language of corporate finance as a legal shield, scaling a supposedly exclusive investment club until it included over 30 million people across India. Sahara's scheme ran into a specific clause within the Indian Companies Act, the Rule of 50. The law provides a hard threshold for private fundraising. If a company makes an investment offer to 49 people, it stays private. The moment it hits 50 investors, the law automatically reclassifies the operation as a deemed public issue. This reclassification brings the company under the direct oversight of SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India. It triggers requirements for extensive financial disclosures, investor protections, and a mandatory listing on a stock exchange. Regardless of the labels Sahara's lawyers used, the sheer size of their investor base legally moved the operation into the public domain. Sahara challenged this classification by arguing that OFCDs were hybrid instruments that didn't require public listing. They insisted they had no obligation to follow stock exchange rules. Sahara claimed they fell strictly under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. This was a specific strategy to block SEBI from intervening in their fundraising. SEBI took the opposite stance. They maintained that collecting funds from millions of citizens is a public issue by its very nature, placing it squarely under their regulatory authority. This disagreement resulted in a protracted legal stalemate. Sahara used a vast legal team to flood regulators with paperwork, appeals, and jurisdictional disputes. By exploiting the friction between these two government agencies, Sahara was able to hide a multi-billion rupee operation within a regulatory blind spot. While the legal battle over the OFCDs continued, a separate Sahara company, Sahara Prime City, filed for a standard IPO. This required submitting routine financial documents to SEBI for review. A SEBI officer began reviewing the thousands of technical pages within this standard filing, checking the conglomerate's financial history. Buried in the footnotes of this unrelated filing, the officer discovered a significant admission. The document noted that other Sahara companies had already raised 24,000 crore rupees from the public through OFCDs. That number, found by accident on a corporate disclosure form, represented the life savings of millions of people who had invested in an unregulated scheme. SEBI finally had the evidence they needed to act. This multi-billion rupee operation, protected by a firewall of lawyers and loopholes, fell apart because of a single, overlooked footnote. For years, the Sahara conglomerate engaged in a relentless legal war with India's market regulator, SEBI. The company utilized technical arguments and layers of appeals to stall every stage of the investigation. These maneuvers lasted so long that the Supreme Court eventually described the conflict as a continuous cat-and-mouse game. The game ended in 2012. The Supreme Court issued a final judgment that stripped away Sahara's legal defenses. This ruling established critical precedents. SEBI can regulate any company raising public money, and Sahara's OFCDs are legally securities. Furthermore, offers to over 49 people constitute a public issue. Consequently, the court ordered Sahara to refund 24,000 crore rupees plus 15% interest. Sahara failed to comply with the specific refund procedures laid out by the court. In 2014, the judiciary responded to this non-compliance. A non-bailable warrant was issued, and Chairman Subrata was sent to jail. While the chairman's arrest ended the legal battle, it shifted the focus toward the internal mechanics of the company's massive financial engine. Investigators began to look past the courtroom drama to determine if Sahara was operating a standard Ponzi scheme. Unlike simple fraudulent schemes that lack infrastructure, Sahara maintained thousands of real offices and employed a vast network of agents across India. However, the company's internal governance remained opaque. Records were difficult to verify, and the flow of money between different divisions was shielded by complex corporate structures. This setup created a dangerous asset-liability mismatch. On one side, the company was taking in billions of rupees in short-term deposits from small-scale investors, who could theoretically ask for their money back at any time. But Sahara invested that liquid cash into long-term assets, like Grosvenor House in London, the Plaza Hotel in New York, and massive luxury townships. When 100 people demand their cash back today, you cannot instantly sell off a piece of a luxury hotel to pay them. This mismatch meant the company was constantly vulnerable. If investor confidence dipped, the entire system would freeze. SEBI required the names and addresses of every depositor to ensure the court-ordered refunds reached the correct people. Sahara responded by sending 127 trucks filled with investor documents directly to the regulator's office. These boxes were filled with disorganized, unindexed papers. This made it nearly impossible for SEBI to cross-reference the data efficiently. Analysts viewed this as an obstruction tactic, a way to bury the regulator in a mountain of messy information while claiming total transparency. To bypass this paper wall, SEBI attempted to contact 20,000 listed investors directly at their recorded addresses. The response rate was staggering. Less than 1% of the letters sent out resulted in a reply from an actual investor. Follow-up texts revealed that many of the residential addresses listed in the documents simply did not exist. This suggested that millions of accounts were fabricated. If these people weren't real, the billions of rupees they supposedly deposited had to come from a different source. This is the primary mechanism for money laundering. By splitting massive sums of untaxed illegal cash into millions of tiny anonymous profiles, that black money is The Sahara case was built on the savings of people in the farthest corners of rural India, daily wage earners and small-town savers with almost zero exposure to formal banking. Initially, the company solved a genuine problem. Agents visited these unbanked neighborhoods every day to collect tiny amounts of cash, helping people who couldn't access a traditional bank build up their savings bit by bit. This daily reliability created a wall of blind trust. Because those agents showed up every single morning, the community felt secure, making them incredibly vulnerable as the company's ambitions began to scale. While agents secured trust on the ground, the company manufactured national legitimacy through an aggressive, high-visibility branding campaign. They became the primary sponsor for the Indian national cricket team. Every time the country's biggest sporting heroes stepped onto the pitch, the company's name was front and center. That reach extended into national field hockey, embedding the brand into the living rooms of millions of families during every major broadcast. For rural investors, the logic was simple. A company featured on national television alongside national heroes had to be a genuine government-backed institution. Most people handing over their cash believed they were putting their money into a standard insured bank deposit. In reality, they were purchasing a complex financial instrument called an unsecured debenture. That unsecured label meant there was no safety net. If the company failed, the legal protection for the investor was non-existent, and their money would simply vanish. While the scheme grew, the Reserve Bank of India, the nation's primary banking regulator, was already monitoring the situation. By 2008, the RBI had internal concerns regarding the way the company was collecting money from the public. However, corporate financial markets fall under the jurisdiction of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI. SEBI only discovered the illegal debt issue by accident years later while reviewing a separate corporate filing. Poor communication between these two watchdog agencies created a massive blind spot, allowing the scheme to expand for years while millions of investors fell through the cracks. The disaster was so vast that it forced the Indian parliament to permanently rewrite the country's corporate laws. The Companies Act of 2013 introduced Section 42, which set strict rules for private placements to prevent companies from using fake private issues to raise public money. Then, the SEBI Amendment Act of 2014 gave regulators new powers to freeze assets, seize properties, and investigate suspicious money pooling schemes with far greater authority. The ultimate safeguard arrived with the BUDS Act of 2019, which focused on banning unregulated deposit schemes entirely. The law simplified everything. If an entity promises to double an investor's money, the regulator asks one question: under whose permission? If there is no government authorization, the scheme is immediately flagged as illegal. This binary test closed the specific loophole that Sahara had used to operate in the shadows for over a decade. Even with these legal fixes, the financial cleanup is still actively struggling today, well into 2025. The government's current solution is the CRCS Sahara Refund Portal, a digital system designed to verify claims through the Aadhaar biometric database. The numbers are staggering. The portal has received over 1.4 crore applications, totaling 97,000 crore rupees in claims. The sheer volume of these requests has created a massive bottleneck, overwhelming the digital infrastructure intended to resolve the crisis. This high-tech digital refund system is disconnected from the daily life of the exact demographic it was built to protect. The portal requires perfect data alignment, but many rural savers are struggling with missing records, inactive bank accounts, and minor spelling mismatches between their old receipts and their Aadhaar cards. For many, navigating this complex digital bureaucracy is just as difficult as the original loss of their savings. The victims are trapped a second time, first by their lack of financial awareness, and now by the digital divide. What began as a model to help the poor save money devolved into a disaster because unchecked growth destroyed transparency and investor protection. The case proves a fundamental reality of finance. A private issue to 3 crore people can never be private. Massive scale without oversight is a systemic scam. Without transparency, even the most helpful model can become a trap for the very